So let's talk a little bit about the tools of the trade, okay? For storytelling fella, it seems like when you start on a story, you pretty quickly got to get to the hook. And the best hook I ever heard in my life ever was, in fact, I've done a number of history series, and my interest in history was absolutely kickstarted by Ken Burns' Civil War. And the very, very first thing in Ken Burns' Civil War is, if you have any knowledge at all, you know that, first Bull Run, first Manassas was the first major battle of the war. And he talks about this guy, Wilbur McLean, who had a house in First Bull Run, and they had the battle there, and cannonballs are coming through his windows, and his mom's nearly killed, and so on. And Wilbur McLean says, my God, I got to get the hell out of here. I'm in the middle of Virginia. I got to leave this house and get out of here and go someplace safe. So he leaves his house in First Bull Run, and he goes and buys a house in the town of Appomattox. He buys the courthouse. And then the narrator says, Wilbur McLean could say that the Civil War started in his backyard and ended in his parlor. And when that 3-minute beat was over, I was in for the rest of it, just in. So the hook, it doesn't have to be drama. It doesn't have to be anything even particularly spectacular, but really early, you got to have something in that story that makes people want to listen to the rest of it.
The hook also has a barb on it, and the barb is really important too. There are many different kinds of hooks, and there's lots of different types of bait. And what you use is, reliant or dependent oftentimes on what exactly you're fishing for. Ken Burns was broadcasting. He had to hook a lot of people. And he used a couple other elements that I think of as barbs on the hook. One was the narrator himself. He could have hired me, with all due modesty. He could have hired James Earl Jones. He could have hired any of the great working narrators in the business. He didn't. He hired David McCullough, who also happens to be one of the great writers and wrote a book, if not the book, on the Civil War. So most people don't know that. Most people watched that segment you just described and were hooked because of the content in it. But it's hard to put a value on the verisimilitude that comes along with a narrator like that, who was both confident and understated, and yet there was so much portent in the way he described it. Now, you also have the music. Forgive me, I'm drawing a blank. Was it the Catoctin Lullaby or something like that?
Or Ash Cohen Farewell or something like that?
Yes. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That thing hooked me before the words did.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, as a documentarian, Ken chose the perfect rendition of the perfect melody to just evoke all of the sentimentality and Wertschmalz. And that song combined with McCullough's narration. And then there's another guy, the real sleeper star of that documentary was Shelby Foote.
My all-time favorite. I read his trilogy 3 times.
Oh my dude,
that Southern Virginia, that Virginia accent coming off his tongue like honey. Everything.
It was, and again, I'll give Ken all due credit because he deserves it, but I just don't know a better example of understated horror, right? I mean, whether Shelby's telling you about the kind of letters that were being written home, right? I mean, that was such a great device to tell that story as well, because a letter is its own story. It's like the Russian nesting eggs. Now you get stories within stories.
And you get the read, and you get the music. That was Ash Cohen Farewell as well. And you get the all of the pathos, just the sheer artistry of the letter. And then you get McCullough saying Sullivan Ballou was killed in battle on First Bull Run. You just knocks the wind out of you. Well, people were crying all across the country. I mean, the entire country was crying, and they're crying because you got a guy with a great voice, you've got a good script, and you've got a grainy black and white photograph.
And this is our story, Bill. It is. It's his story, but he is us, right? I mean, we're sitting there watching something that really, I mean, it feels a long, long way away, but actually, it's that, right? It was
And
just,
it's the timelessness of the advice, right? To that his son would grow up to honorable manhood and all of these things that and I think the reason that hit so hard was because so many Americans, I think, felt like we've lost something since Sullivan Ballou.
yeah.
That honey, if I never see you again, your name will be the last words on my lips, and that we had as much time together as we could, and that and that the union needs me, and that if I'm killed, we need to raise our son to honorable manhood, and we look around and we don't see so much honorable manhood anymore, and it was just this kind of ache for something really primal, that we seem to be missing.
Also, too, it was such a nice juxtaposition between, again, that intensely human individual thing you just articulated, right next to the cold calculus of technology and tactics, right? But Shelby did it even better in that episode when he talked about the confusion in the aftermath of Shiloh, when for the first time you had rows of men, boys really, 4, 5, sometimes 6 deep, all killed by the same bullet. That had never happened before
No.
because never before had technology so outpaced tactics, right? And so the reason it landed with such a thud. Now you got to picture me. I'm that came out what 25 years ago. I'm sitting there next to my dad who taught this very course. And I look over and I see my dad weeping as Shelby Foote is describing how we could have stumbled into a world where a single bullet can kill 6 guys. And then the confusion of the people coming in to clean up the dead, just looking at it, saying, what have we unleashed here?
Pieces of people. Yeah.
Pieces of people. And of course, the pigs come out and they
Yeah.
feast on the dead. And to bring it back to the story and not just the facts and not just the history of it, but to have Shelby Foote describing it with all he was almost tired, Bill. He was almost just it was so matter of
Shelby Foote,
fact and reflective.
it's like Shelby. The reason Shelby Foote was so effective in the Civil War was because everybody who watched him had the feeling he was there and saw it with his own eyes. He sounded like he saw it with his own eyes.
It's like Quint sitting there in that town meeting,
Yep.
I'll get you, Shark. He's seen it all. He's read
seen
it
it all.
all. He's written it all. But, he still has something to say to people who maybe haven't heard it before.
We delivered the bomb.
Yeah, we delivered that's the speech, right? That's the speech.